Ever find yourself wondering, like, what actually makes all those apps and websites we use every day actually work?
Right. It's like magic, but not really.
Totally. And today we're diving into something that plays a huge role in that Microsoft Azure.
And the funny thing is, you probably use it more often than you realize,
Yeah.
even if you don't actually know it.
Exactly. And for this deep dive, we're working with some pretty common sources, excerpts from Wikipedia, and an online course description.
Really shows you that interesting stuff can be found just about anywhere, huh?
No kidding. Okay, so to kick things off, can you give us a quick rundown on what Microsoft Azure actually is?
Well, the simple answer is it's a massive collection of cloud computing services.
Okay, so more than just the cloud.
Yeah, the cloud is kind of a simplified way of putting it. Think of Azure like, a toolbox. But instead of wrenches and screwdrivers, it's full of tools for building and running digital things. Websites, apps, anything you can imagine, really.
So it's like a digital toolbox then.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so powerful. It's super flexible. You need to build a simple website. Azure can do it. What about some crazy complex AI? Azure's got you covered there too.
Wow, that's impressive. Speaking of complex, I was checking out the Wikipedia page, and they have a massive list of services. Anything in particular that jumps out at you?
I mean, honestly, the variety is just mind-blowing. There's really something for just about everything. But one that I always find fascinating is Azure Orbital.
Azure Orbital, what is that? Some kind of space program?
Kind of. It involves using satellites to beam data straight to the cloud.
Whoa, hold on. Satellites. Like, are we talking about super fast internet speeds here?
That's the idea. They're trying to bypass all those slow ground-based networks. And yeah, it could be a total game changer, especially for things like, oh, I don't know, gaming.
Okay, now that's something I can get behind. Faster internet for gaming. Sign me up.
Right. But it goes beyond just gaming, though. Think about things like disaster response, where every second counts. Imagine firefighters having real-time satellite imagery of a wildfire. That could be life-saving.
Wow, that's incredible. So from speeding up video games to potentially helping save the planet, Azure Orbital has some serious range.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive stuff.
Okay, so we've got satellites beaming data around. What else is in Microsoft's bag of tricks?
Well, how about Azure Quantum?
Quantum, like quantum
That's right.
physics, quantum.
The one and only. It's all about using quantum mechanics to solve super complex problems. We're talking problems that would make even the most powerful computers sweat.
So not just making our laptops a bit faster then.
Not even close. This is next level stuff. Think about things like revolutionizing drug discovery, designing new materials, cracking codes that would take normal computers like thousands of years to figure out.
Okay, so it's safe to say that this is some pretty mind-blowing technology. But is this something we'll ever actually use, or is it all just, theoretical at this point?
It's definitely still early days, but what's exciting is that with Azure Quantum, developers and researchers can actually start experimenting with quantum algorithms right now. It's making this technology way more accessible, which is a huge deal.
So not quite quantum computers in our homes just yet, but we're getting there.
Something like that. It's not science fiction anymore. It's becoming a reality.
This is where it gets really interesting, right? Because we're talking about real-world applications here.
Absolutely. And that's where that online course description comes in. Businesses are already using Azure like crazy, and they need people who actually know how to use it.
So it's not just some abstract tech thing. It's actually translating into job opportunities.
Or absolutely. The demand for Azure skills is going through the roof.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So we've talked about what Azure can do, but what about how it actually works? Wikipedia mentions something called the fabric layer when they're describing Azure's architecture. What is that? Some kind of super secret tech?
It sounds way more complicated than it really is. Think of it like an orchestra. You've got all these different instruments, all playing their own parts, right? The fabric layer is like the conductor, making sure everything works together.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. So it's basically the brains of the operation.
You got it. It manages all the servers, networks, storage, everything, so you don't have to.
That's pretty impressive. It's amazing how much is going on behind the scenes of something we use every day.
Exactly. And that's kind of the beauty of it. You don't need to be a computer whiz to use it.
True. So how did we even get here? Did Microsoft just invent the cloud one day?
It's actually a pretty interesting story. According to Wikipedia, it all started with a company called Groove Networks back in the mid-2000s.
Groove networks. That doesn't sound very cloudy to me. What did they do?
They were all about peer-to-peer software, like early file sharing and messaging apps.
Okay, so how do we get from messaging apps to a massive cloud platform?
Well, Microsoft saw something special in their technology, so they acquired them.
Ah, okay, now it's starting to make sense.
And this is where things get really interesting. They brought in this legendary developer, Dave Cutler, to kind of like lead the whole project.
Dave Cutler, is he some kind of tech celebrity I should know about?
You kidding? This guy was a big deal at Microsoft. He helped create some of their most popular operating systems, like back in the day.
No way. So they brought him out of retirement for this.
Pretty much. They needed someone who knew how to build complex systems from the ground up. And that's exactly what he did with Azure. Basically created a whole new operating system, but designed specifically for the cloud.
Wow, that's some serious tech history right there. So they launched this thing, Windows Azure, in 2010, right? But then they dropped the Windows part a few years later. What was that all about?
Well, as Azure started to grow, it became pretty clear that it wasn't just about Windows anymore.
Yeah.
It could support all sorts of operating systems and technologies. So ditching the Windows from the name just made sense. Showed everyone they were serious about being a platform for, well, everything.
Makes sense. So 2010 they launched, 2014 they ditched the Windows. Sounds like things were moving pretty fast. Were there any other big moments along the way?
Oh, tons. They were constantly adding new things. One of the early ones that really made a splash was as Azure SQL Database actually came out in 2009.
Wait, hold up. They released a feature before the actual platform. That's kind of a power move, right?
It shows you how quickly things were changing. But yeah, it was a big deal. Imagine. Businesses could finally ditch those clunky database servers and just let Microsoft handle it all in the cloud.
Yeah.
No more hardware headaches, no more maintenance nightmares.
Talk about a game changer. Sounds like Azure has been on a pretty impressive run.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just look at where they are now. One of the biggest cloud platforms in the world. They're right up there with Amazon and Google.
Wow, that's a pretty exclusive club to be a part of. But it can't all be sunshine and roses, right?
Mm.
Have there ever been any major Azure outages, like times when the whole thing just crashed?
Well, nobody's perfect.
Mhm.
Even tech giants have their off days.
Hmm.
Wikipedia actually mentions a pretty big one back in 2018. Affected their North Europe region.
What happened? Did someone trip over the power cord?
Worse, the cooling system went down.
You mean like the servers overheated? Ouch. That sounds expensive.
Yeah, not a fun day at the office. Apparently, Azure was down for like 11 hours because of it.
11 hours! I can only imagine the mayhem that caused for all those businesses that rely on it.
Yeah, it definitely highlighted just how important reliability is in this whole cloud computing thing.
For sure. Speaking of things that can go wrong, I also saw something about a DNS migration issue back in 2019. What was that about?
Right, so DNS is basically like the phone book of the internet.
Okay, the phone book. All right, go on.
So you type in a website name like thedeepdive.com, right? But computers don't really speak words. They use numbers, IP addresses, to be exact.
And DNS is what translates those words into numbers.
Exactly. It's how your computer knows where to go to find the website you're looking for.
Okay, that makes sense. So what happened in 2019? Did they lose the internet's phone book?
Kind of. They were doing a big DNS migration and something got messed up along the way, caused major outages for a bunch of services that use Azure, Office 365, Xbox Live, you name it.
That must have been a rough day for a lot of people. No work, no gaming.
It really makes you realize how much we rely on this stuff without even thinking about it.
Totally. But with all this data floating around in the cloud, what about security? I mean, Azure seems like a pretty big target for hackers, right?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And honestly, Azure has had its fair share of security challenges. In fact, there were some pretty public criticisms of Microsoft's security practices just last year, in July 2023.
Really? What happened?
A group of hackers managed to exploit a vulnerability in one of Microsoft's software products. And it wasn't just any data breach. These guys got into U.S. government email systems.
Oh, wow. That's not good. Not good at all. Oh, wow.
That's,
Not good. Not good at all.
yeah, it was a pretty big deal.
So how did Microsoft respond to that? I mean, people had to be freaking out.
Oh, they definitely felt the heat. Senators, cybersecurity experts, everyone was calling them out. More accountability, more transparency, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, I bet that was a wake-up call for them.
Definitely a reminder that no one's invincible.
Yeah.
Even the big tech giants.
For sure. So we've talked about Azure's journey, all the amazing things it can do, even dipped our toes into quantum computing. Any thoughts on what's next for them?
Well, if their past is anything to go by, I think we can expect big things. They're always coming up with something new, pushing the limits, especially with things like quantum computing becoming more accessible through Azure. It's really an exciting time to be following this stuff.
It really is. So we've covered a lot of ground today, learned a ton from how Azure works to how it's changing the world, even what it might mean for our future.
And to think, we started with just a Wikipedia page and a course description.
See, you never know where these deep dives will take us. For everyone listening, if you're as fascinated by Microsoft Azure as we are, don't forget to check out the show notes. We'll have links to everything we talked about, plus some bonus stuff if you're feeling extra curious.
Always good to keep learning.
That's what we're all about. Thanks for diving deep with us, everyone.